So this is the first edition, part one of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcast at 20:30 GMT on Friday, the 7th of October, 2022, on the internet, not on satellite or terrestrial or cable networks or cable platforms. This is the 7th of October 2022, and the turmoil in the Truss disaster camp parked at number 10 Downing Street in London SW1 continues. And back in Pakistan, Imran Khan is in the news after he has offered to talk with Shehbaz Sharif over the next step to solve the problems of Pakistan, which is to hold the election first, and until the election, allow Shehbaz Sharif to remain in office. But the election must be held free and fairly. We shall be talking about those and also taking a look at what is happening in relation to the corruption of various elected mayors and the corruption in Croydon that we talked about 2 days ago, as uncovered by a particular special edition broadcast by Al Jazeera English. Of course, the Labour files, which show that the Labour Party, centrally, the United Kingdom Labour Party, at central level, has been openly complicit with active lying and corruption. Now, Croydon is one of the most corrupt local councils because Croydon Council operated a series of criminal front outlets and outfits. It created with the collusion and complicity of sitting members of the council, which council at that time was Labour controlled, and a woman called Jo Negrini. These are crooks. And Croydon itself had to declare itself a bankrupt. And the Labour Party did nothing to bring to order, bring to an end the corruption and criminality that were going on, rampant corruption and criminality going on in in Croydon. Did I say Camden as a slip of the tongue? I must have done, but it wasn't just a slip of the tongue. Camden, Labour controlled, is corrupt. Haringey, Labour controlled, remains corrupt despite the stunt created by the so-called momentum outlet that temporarily sort of asserted control by foisting a few of the momentum kind of placemen and placewomen in key positions. Now, Haringey is the place, is the corrupt council where Baby P was murdered. And the council's line management employee responsible for the cover-up of the murder of the child, Sharon Shoesmith, featured quite prominently for a significant number of months in the UK national news. And this was during the kind of last few months, I think, of the Gordon Brown-fronted regime. Just before the May 2010 elections in the UK. And the schools minister, or the minister responsible for kind of social services, Ed Balls, staged a stunt by publicly sacking Sharon Shoesmith and condemning her role and condemning her. All of that got kind of suppressed or distorted by subsequent litigation that Sharon Shoesmith brought. And the corrupt court system, the corrupt, criminally negligent civil court system in the UK gave de facto exoneration to Sharon Shoesmith, thus justifying the murderously negligent, complicit Haringey Council, almost virtual exemption or exoneration. So what happened in the Labour Party, essentially lying to cover up the crooks, corruption in Croydon Council, was not confined to the Labour Party headquarters. Corruption, corrupt negligence is rampant in the court system. And as we have said and had to say in context about Hillsborough, the disaster at Hillsborough in Sheffield, Hillsborough football stadium in Sheffield, 1989 Hillsborough disaster, refers to the deaths of nearly 100 football fans due to the negligence of those who control the entrance and exit to the Hillsborough Stadium. The deaths were caused by the stampede, due to the negligence and negligent behavior and stupid behavior of the police in control. They completely lost control, and they had no idea of what control was, what saving the fans and the people, the spectators involved or entailed. They gave up their duties to save the people there. And the following day, the Murdoch-controlled scum newspaper blamed the fans, blamed the victims, and published fabricated quotations exonerating the police and attributing those fabricated quotations to the police. The scum since has been banned in Liverpool because the fans were mainly from the Liverpool area, and the team was the Liverpool team that they were there to support in the Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield. Now, there is a petition going online which says that about 100,000 people have signed a petition about the murder by the police, Metropolitan Police. In the first week of September 2022, that is last month, about a month and 2 days ago, the murder by brazen direct shooting by the Metropolitan Police of Chris Kaba, however you pronounce it. Chris Kaba was training to be an architect and had already been expecting a child and was going to get married in 5 months' time. And he was driving a car in South London, and the car didn't belong to him, but apparently it later transpired the car had been registered as a suspect car in relation to another investigation or another kind of event that Chris Kaba or Kaba had nothing to do with. Chris Kaba was not carrying a gun, and Chris Kaba was not a suspect in any offense, and he was not a suspect to be arrested about anything else. But the offense he was guilty of in the sight of the police, Metropolitan Police, was that he was a black person. He was 24 years old. And they decided to follow him in an unmarked car and not let him know that they're following him. They were following him until they staged a collision. The collision is the clash with his car, which collision they followed by approaching him and shooting him straight, directly at the driver's window where he was driving. And he was seriously injured, and he went to hospital. He was taken to hospital, and within a very short time he died of the injuries. Now the complaints against his murder have been kind of initially denied by the Metropolitan Police as well as by the so-called absolutely disgraceful independent police complaints banality, which also took the same line of denial as done by the Metropolitan Police. Both of those have now given ground and have considered some of the demands of the family of Chris Kaba and the bereaved relations. But they haven't gone anywhere near accepting responsibility where it matters, responsibility for the murder. And the fact that this is the kind of young person who can be compared with Stephen Lawrence, because Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered in April 1994, was it 94 or 93? In Eltham, in southeast London. His racist gang murdered him as he was standing waiting at the bus stop in Eltham. Stephen Lawrence, too, was training to be an architect. So, I mean, the severity of the similarity, let's say, or similarities in the prejudice and the prejudice perception held by racist police in the Metropolitan Police towards black young persons, as shown by the similarity of the prejudice between the murderers of Stephen Lawrence and the murderer police of Chris Kaba or Kaba. Kaba was not, he didn't commit a crime and he wasn't a criminal, and nor was Stephen Lawrence. And both were students of architecture. I mean, he couldn't get more conventional in terms of academic studies and so on. So these two were two very conventionally engaged students, but they were both black men in London, and both were murdered for no reason except that they were black. The fact that they were murdered by four or a gang of four racist whites, and the other one, Chris, was murdered by a metropolitan police person should give reason for serious reflection about this bogus Black History Month thing that keeps being staged by idiots. Black History Month was initially confected by a very ignorant and confused Black history enthusiast through the thing called ASA. And it was funded by the GLC. But it was completely corruptly conceived, ignorantly conceived, because it left out the reality. Black in this country is not an isolated island, you morons. Black in the UK is part of a very real demography which is very mixed. And the Black, because of the empirical realities, necessarily involves people, large numbers of people of Asian backgrounds and identities. So to call the victims of racism that is experienced by people of African origin, either directly from Africa or through the Caribbean experiences, is false and misleading. Because so long as the Black is done, conceived, and treated by leaving out the experience of the African people on the one side and ignoring the reality of the Asian people's experience, from that experience that the African origin and Caribbean origin Black people experience. So long as that is done, and the two are not combined in reality of the facts, the moral strength, the moral case and the evidential case against the racists, attacks on the Asian people as well as on the African people, will fail to materialize, fail to become a reality. There was a kind of conflated confusion created by the authors of the Labour Party Black sections that came into prominence very shortly after the murders of Cynthia Jarrett and the attack on the Black mother in Brixton, Sherry Groves. Although it came in the immediate aftermath, not necessarily following those events, but the Labour Party Black section was kind of promoted by the crooks in the Labour Party, the racists in the Labour Party, who kind of hijacked the topicality of Black people being new targets of new racist attacks. The Labour Party Black section was deliberately kept separate from what was going on in the community, in society. So there was no real debate about the Labour Party's own racism. And there was no clue as to what the so-called Labour Party black sections was going to do or be used to do about the Labour Party's own racism. So there was no policy, there was absolutely no policy discussion at any level in the Labour Party linked with the Labour Party black section, so-called, about how to deal with police racism and how to deal with courts, the judicial racism, and how to deal with the racist exclusion that was practiced by the Labour Party in Parliament. To this day, the Labour Party has not initiated any intellectual basis, intellectual contextual analysis or background to any updating of the legislation concerning the events that keep happening, like Chris Kaba's murder and the other murder in 2011 in Haringey of a black man by the Metropolitan Police. None of the murders and none of the gross murders and gross kind of hiding and concealment of the evidence and the denial of the impact has been taken up by any of the so-called black MPs. All the black-skinned members of parliament belonging to the Labour Party are and have been and have behaved and continue to behave as intellectually totally incapable of dealing with the issues. Intellectually incapable of dealing with the issues, the challenges. And they have none of them has shown any awareness of international perspective about the racist violation of the human rights of the black sections. Most of the victims, by definition, because of generation and because of chronology, most of the victims of racism by the police are born, brought up, raised, and brainwashed in the UK. Now, the prominence allocated by the racist media to Diane Abbott, whom we call for her role Dirty Di, the role that she has been allocated, the status she has been allocated, has been completely, absolutely not connected with the occurrences of racism against black people. Remember, we are defining black as including African as well as Asian background people. But Dirty Di has been in the news for the wrong reason. She has been mostly ridiculed and mocked as a part of the Corbyn kind of crew, Jeremy Corbyn crew, when Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party. That's partly due to the fact that she and Corbyn had sexual relations, that Corbyn's former wife, Christine Chapman, allowed the Daily Mail to have and publish, starting shortly after Corbyn became, quote, leader. That has been in the back or in the background always of the media's references to Diane Abbott, although they have not expressly or explicitly mention that all the time, every time they mention her. That has been the background awareness. Turning to her role intellectually, Diane Abbott has been completely ridiculed and mocked out of the court, if you like, when it comes to issues and central kind of substantial substance and content in her contributions. Quite apart from the fact that she later became known publicly as Jeremy Corbyn's girlfriend, X, she was given a platform by the BBC for absolutely very mysterious reasons to appear on Andrew Brilopad Neil's British BBC politics kind of outlet, along with Michael the Spanish one, isn't he? And it turned out later, not at the beginning, that Portillo, Michael Portillo, the Spanish one, and Dirty Di were school contemporaries at school or school friends. And it further was revealed that they were personally very close friends. Now, who cooked up that idea of giving those two a joint platform on the BBC, Brilopad's program, has not yet been publicly established. But the fact that they were together and that Dirty Di had known Portillo from the school days, for her school days, shows that it wasn't. The Dirty Di had nothing to do, Dirty Di's appearance on the BBC had nothing to do with any intrinsic intellectual abilities on her part, but something completely extra academic, if you like. Her personal history with Michael Portillo. And when the two were, let's say, visually compared, Portillo's contributions almost always turned out to be, in quality terms, substantial terms, heavier, if you like, variety than Dirty Di's. And Dirty Di has always been very shallow, which is the main issue that came up whenever the Scum and the Daily Mail and their ilks mocked her and their columnists mocked her. Essentially, what it comes down to, it actually is that the fact that there has been a prominent black MP, that this is the one that she has been referred to as the oldest, kind of the first black MP, etc., which is not true. But the fact that she has been legitimately gives rise to the fact that she has to have evidence of delivering substantial quality contributions, both in the House of Commons as well as in the public forums, as a black MP, to justify the stupid assumption or the line that there is a thing called Black History being chronicled on the Black History Month activities. Both are non-existent. Just like the Vice newspaper, which was an offshoot of the racists from the NUJ, Mike Jamshit, Adrian White, and Jake Eccleston of the National Union of Journalists, who set up shop in the Victoria Park Square near Bethnal Green Station in 1981 under the falsely adopted banner of Eastern News, which I joined as an Easterner, and then found myself engaged in battle against the Mike Jamshid. And the Jamshid racist didn't know how to run away from the debates that I was having with them. So they indulged in the typical adopted traitor and find an excuse. So they invented a thing called an extra page on the Eastern News. And they discovered a completely, absolutely strange, bogus kind of uncle, Nephew Tom, called Val McCullough. He was not in any way a campaigner, he was a kind of accountant, sort of. And they invited him, and they started a page with his name on the Eastern News. And this then immediately was used as the springboard for the apartheid funded, that is the Barclays Bank funded outlet called the Vice from there. So Val McCullough was joined by Alex Pascal. Alex Pascal was nothing to do with the Eastern News, but he was a name in the ethnic surrogates kind of business, mainly because of the black Londoners' pretension. So Alex Pascal and this Val McCullough were joined by a South African born Robert Gabenda. He's an Indian of South African kind of background. Robert Gabenda was and had been a court journalist in South Africa before he landed in the United Kingdom. And Robert Gobinder had pretensions that he was different. But it turned out that Robert Gobinder, before the fall of the USSR, had been bribed and bought up by Romania's dictator Ceausescu. And Robert Gobinder confessed to all of that by giving me presents of at least 3, if not 4, titles bearing his name and being about praise by him of Nicolae Ceausescu of Romania. So if you look at all the history, all these people in the United Kingdom in the last 50 years operating as approved, quote, black anti-racists, you'd find that they are essentially very shallow, very artificial, very faked, and very kind of dishonest self-seekers, self-promoters, so readily available to be bought and operated and kind of processed by the racists in post-colonial, so-called post-colonial years. Britain remains Britain, that is the ones that make the decisions, that occupy the positions of decision making in the state, is as racist and as imperialistic as it ever was. And the fact that the so-called Raj, the empire, the kingdom in the subcontinent ended in August 1947. The fact that it did end with the inauguration of the republics of Pakistan on the 14th of August and India on the 15th of August 1947. That never became analyzed, and the actual events following that or those 2 events never got analyzed in Britain, analyzed in the Speed Black History Month. And as I said previously, the Black History Month is a grotesque distortion at every level. I encountered a thing called John. What's his name? What was his name? It was a BBC London kind of linked individual, a white man called John something in the early 1970s. At a meeting held in the Bethnal Green area, somewhere in Bethnal Green Road, this racist moron, I think it was John Brown or something like John Brown, he made the stupid assertion about the Bangladeshis. Completely contradictory and absolutely unfounded about the whole community. It might apply to some people, but most certainly did not reflect or represent the behavior or the attitude of conscientious Bangladeshis, no matter how small that number might be. And this criminal said that the Bangladeshis were too easily pleased or too easily satisfied. Now, what you are saying probably referred to some of the Bangladeshis that he knew who could be given a pat on the back and who could look back in gratitude and say, "Thank you, Master." But it didn't apply to us. Well, it most certainly never applies to me. I think his name was Brown, John Brown. But I can research and update on that particular part of the name. Now, the grinning back and showing gratitude, "Thank you, Master," refers to the behavior later of one or two, at least two or three Bangladeshis resident in the Brick Lane area who were kind of entertained or treated to entertainment by the Labour Party controlled council's then leader, the racist idiot called Paul Beasley. And apparently, Beasley took these couple of Bangladeshis on helicopter travels or trips around London, around East London. Only God knows how flying them in a helicopter trip had anything to do with anything. And these overly grateful Bangladeshis grinned and forever mentioned Paul Beasley in frenetic, fervent kind of enthusiasm, as if he was somebody extraordinary come from the outer space or something. Beasley was a racist. Beasley was an idiot and ignorant, as I told him to his face in 1978. In July 1978, 2 months after the pair of racists murdered Altabali, there was a meeting at the Montefiore Center. The meeting was organized under the title of the Tower Hamlets Citizens of Tower Hamlets, Council of Citizens of Tower Hamlets, and had been convened by using the politically and morally dead Joe Hunt as the inviter. And Beasley arrived there, as well as the couple of individuals from the Central Commission for Racial Enslavement, CRE. Now, the CRE had been itself launched in April 1977. So, this was not long after the CRE had been launched. So at the beginning of the proceedings in that meeting, the meeting was supposed to be a surrogates meeting, showing gratitude to the council leader, gratitude to the CRE, and gratitude to the UK state, which was still being fronted by the complete racist James Callaghan. So before the events got going, I pointedly named Paul Beasley and I said that the racism in Tower Hamlets was being actually tolerated and allowed by this racist. And I called him this racist Paul Beasley. And he could feel that there was an electric response going through the hall, the room. Nobody had ever called a council leader this racist at a meeting like this. And there was this electric response. And Beasley immediately put on a kind of red hue on his skin. He didn't know what to say, and whatever he would say would be completely rebuffed and rejected by me, which I did. And I went on giving details about Beasley's racism and the council's racism. But it appears that all the others present, the surrogates and the gratefuls, were descendants of the likes of Mir Zafar Ali Khan, who betrayed the community and was bribed and bought by Robert Clive in 1757. This Beasley, who had a few years later, from under 78, so 79, just before the end of 1980, together with the racist trade union leader, so-called, called Dan Jones, conspired with the Home Office, with Peter Shaw, to deport Abdus Salik to Germany. And it was because of me, my role in exposing Paul Beasley, the racist, that Beasley knew that he should not be provoking a situation where I became involved in campaigning against him. It was because of that he told Dan Jones, the racist, to not go ahead with the deportation of Abdul Salik the following day to Germany. And so they cooked up a hasty way to stop the deportation by getting Peter Shaw to tell the Home Office not to deport Abdul Salik. And they didn't deport Abdul Salik because by the time this happened, the withdrawal of the deportation order against Abdul Salik, Margaret Thatcher was in power. That was in 1980. And Jim Callaghan had just lost the election in 1979. These are real events, real, actual campaigning wars against racism in this country. Not a single such event, let alone this event, is featured in the so-called Black History Month. Because the Black History Month is designed by mental slaves, surrogates, and assorted other mental slaves and surrogates and nephews and nieces Toms or Thomasinus or whatever. And so, therefore, the history of the battle against the racist policing in Tottenham, in Brixton, in Bristol in 1981, that history has never been told. And it was left to the racist Paul Decker controlled Daily Mail to name these racist murderers of Stephen Lawrence with a one-word splash, front page splash called murderers. Not the black so-called vice produced by the racist Mike Jamshid and others via their mental slave Val McCalla, nor any other so-called black publication. It was the Daily Mail, the racist Daily Mail, that named these racists and called them murderers and forced the subsequent events, which included the appointment of the so-called Macpherson report or Macpherson inquiry. Now, Macpherson inquiry was chaired by a former judge called Macpherson, and the initial proceedings included the submission by those who spoke on behalf of the family of the bereaved family of Stephen Lawrence, that the police were So this edition is continuing, but it got interrupted. This is 52 minutes 44 seconds, and this is 21:23 hours GMT. So this broadcast is still on. There is something technically wrong in the system. So I was talking about a number of things that have been central to the fight against racism at every stage in the UK in the last 50 years. But those main events have been totally left out of the kind of program as published in the name of the Black History Month every October. Well, every October since this month is being observed by local councils. Not all the local councils, but quite a few, mainly London-based councils. And the reason why this program is so completely bereft and devoid of the substance of the real struggle of racism, struggle of opposing racism by black people, is because of its origin. The origin was mainly funded and supported and patronized and matronized by the racists in control of the Greater London Council. The main front person was, of course, Ken Lyingstill Livingstone. And Ken Lyingstill Livingstone, being a racist, would never have anything to do with any genuinely anti-racist intellectual program. And so therefore the funding of the History Month was in a way that accorded with the agenda that Ken racist liar Livingstone would agree with. And it would leave out any reference, all references to the both the GLC, the Greater London Council, Greater London level, as well as the local borough councils. And it did. One of the things that the racists in this country have done, the racists in the Labour Party mold, not in the Conservative Party mold, I shall come to discussing how the likes of Suella Cruella Fernandez, originating from Goa in India, and Priti Patel, who is from East Africa but actually of Gujarati origin. How these two extremely hateful Hindutva kind of supporter, Priti Patel, and ethnic surrogate Suella Cruella Fernandez, how these two became given prominent places in the so-called conservative cabinet, while they were against fighting racism, against the human rights of the people, the majority of whom are African and Asian. Shall come to that. And the conservative having somebody like this complete moron, a Kashmiri origin Conservative Party MP, and some other Conservative Party MPs with really deep black skin, including the crazy Kwarteng, who is installed in the position of the bogus position of the finance minister in Liar Truss's so-called cabinet. And how Boris Johnson was able to flaunt a totally dark skinned black as the chair of a bogus commission that was intended to whitewash, literally whitewash, the racist policies. We shall come to that because that one, the very dark skinned chair of the commission that the racist Boris Johnson set up, belonged to the Voice. I mean, the Voice, the Vice newspaper gave him a platform for years. And the platform that he used was a platform for supplication to racism and racists. And he was a thoroughly updated, shameless uncle or nephew Tom. And there is no evidence in the programming for Black History Month anywhere that any of the real struggles, battles, and controversies and confrontations and arguments against racist institutions, racist decision making, racist judiciary, racist court system, racist lawyers, racist metropolitan police, and racist so called independent inquiries, independent commission for investigating the police. That is a long list of areas of life, society, reality that are left intentionally from inclusion in the discussions, so called, that are held by the organizers of the Black History Month. I'll shortly check, if I can check, given the technical kind of infrastructural problems that we appear to be having in this particular broadcast. I shall check what the Newham Council is calling its program for Black History Month this year. And I'm able to say, even before I check that what I will encounter, what I will come across, will be nothing but an additionally outrageous, aggravating list of supplication, surrogation, submission, servility, and stupidity. So, how do we access that information from the Newham Council? Let's see. Now, given that black people's human rights, meaning that black people of African and Asian backgrounds, the reality being that the black people's human rights are violated to begin with as a starting point, what is there to celebrate? And yet, there is this entry that I've come across in the short search. It says, celebrate Black History Month, Black History documentaries. And it says, entertainment and cinema membership at £14.90 a month. for 6 months, limited time of a stream, emotional and electric Black History Month movies with Now Cinema membership, etc. And the next one, the entry. Okay, let's see what Black History Month 2020 is being called. Now, the top face on the top of this page is the face of a mulatto female, let's say. It's not white, but it's very not black. What Black History Month means to me. So, what they're doing is they're mulattoizing black people. And it is completely, absolutely artificial, the whole thing. It's all to do with the business. This is not for the Newham Council, but we should go to Newham Council shortly and see what they have. And it says building a fair on Newham. And the face of this imperialist kind of agent, Roxana Fias, the viewer. OBE. So I couldn't find in the main display any reference to the Black History Month. Even though Newham has been one of the main advertisers of the Black History Month, one of the councils that has been advertising Black History Month almost from the beginning. So the main display is the picture of Roxana Fiers. Roxana Fiers is, of course, the crux nominee for the corrupt post of the elected mayor in Newham. When the lying Dave Hill, who was supposed to be the London diary person for years, that included the 2010 commencement of the corrupt mayor post in Tower Hamlets. When the Dave Hill, he left the Guardian because of changes that came about, changes associated with the departure of Alan Rabishar as the chief editor-in-chief of the Guardian Group. And Rabishar's replacement as editor-in-chief by Catherine Vanity. Now, Dave Hill is a particularly backward, ignorant, stupid, racist, and corrupt, self-seeking so-called journal. And throughout the period of Luthraman's kind of incumbency in the corrupt post, while Dave Hill was still connected with the Guardian, Dave Hill published absolute packs of lies and idiocies. And he avoided telling the truth about the corruption that Luthran was engaged in, or the corruption and lies and criminality that the Luthran fronted Tower Hamlets Council clique was engaged in. So after he left the Guardian, or was pushed out of the Guardian, Dave the Parasite Hill began his own website called On London. And as part of the On London adventure, Dave Hill published in 2017, that is the calendar year before the actual election of 2018, a propaganda piece for Roxana Fiers in Newham. And in that piece, one of the lies that Dave Hill promoted and peddled was that Fiers was actually promising honesty if she got in as mayor in place of Robin Wales. And that honesty, claimed this liar, Dave Hill, was in Roxana Fiers' promise that she would hold a referendum as to whether there should be the post of elected mayor in Newham at all. Well, it was very clear to me that that was a lie by Roxana Fiers. And the fact that it was a lie and that the lie would be swallowed as an acceptable, entertaining, and palatable truth by the most of the gullibles in Newham that would support her. Not all the people of Newham, but most of the gullibles in Newham. Remember, I'm making the distinction. It was very clear that they would think that Roxana Fiers by saying that she would have a vote on whether to have an elected mayor in Newham at all, that by saying that and by doing that, she was meaning to end the corrupt mayor system. That is what they would interpret. And that is what she knew they would interpret. And that is what she wanted to convey as the truth when she knew that it was a lie. So Dave Hill, the idiot, promoted that as a truth as well. And there is this Paul Waugh, the awful Paul Waugh. Is it Huffington Post? I mean, Paul Waugh is as bad. And he promoted Roxana Fias again in 2017 and repeated Roxana Fias's pack of lies in the run up to the internal Labour Party Newham election as to who should be the Labour Party's candidate for that post of mayor at the May 2018 mayor election that was due to be held in May, of course, in 2018. So the promotion piece by Dave Hill for Roxana Fias was as corrupt, as bad, as dishonest, as completely pathetic as the promotion piece done by Paul Waugh. And despite the fact that there is a thing called Black History Month, and that there is a thing called Black weekly newspaper, The Voice. It never is black. It's never a newspaper. It was a complete corrupt, lying thing from the beginning. There is no examination. There has been no examination of the corruption of the elected mayor, either in Tower Hamlets or in Newham or in Hackney or in Lewisham, and there is not going to be any, of course, in relation to Croydon. So where are these people, the so-called black? They say Lutfur Rahman was the first black Muslim or a Muslim mayor. What the fuck? He was not a Muslim candidate. He was the choice of crooks. First Muslim woman mayor in Europe. Fuck off. Roxana Fayaz is neither a Muslim nor a Muslim candidate. Never has been, never will be. But even if theoretically she can be accepted as being relatable to a Muslim, very broadly speaking, a Muslim kind of demography, Roxana Fayaz cannot be expected to deliver anything, anything So this is a program that has been interrupted more than once now. So we shall end this program before another interruption. So let's